Hey, good day, everybody. My name is Danny Weiss. I'm a neonatologist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto, and one of the co-chairs of the NHRC Foundation's curriculum, along with Dr. Danielle Rios. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our special session, which is the Mentoring and Development in Neonatal Hemodynamics session. This is the second time we're running this particular session, and I think it's fantastic to help our trainees and junior faculty navigate the the social and financial and political landscape associated with neonatal hemodynamics. It's my pleasure to, as usual, welcome our trainees and junior faculty as panelists. And we have an all-star lineup of speakers today. And a warm welcome to all of our seminar attendees who, while we can't see you, we do grateful for you to join us. And as for everyone, please do, at any time, please enter questions into the Q&A. And I expect, hopefully the Q&A is lively given the topic today. I want to acknowledge that the Neonatal Hemodynamics and TNE Foundation's curriculum is supported by an unrestricted educational grant from Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals. And as with all our sessions, feedback is incredibly important in shaping the future of education in neonatal hemodynamics, including this international seminar series. I want to invite you to complete the session evaluation. At the end, we're going to put this QR code back up at the end of the session. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Amir Ashrafi is a cardiac neonatologist and director of the Neonatal Cardiac Intensive Care Unit at CHOP Children's Hospital. He's also the medical director of the Neonatal ECMO program and program director for the Neonatal Cardiovascular Intensive Care and Hemodynamics Fellowship at UC Irvine. A critical topic that he's going to be talking about is how to package and market yourself to land a faculty position. So after you become an expert in neonatal hemodynamics, you can actually put food on the table. So I'm going to stop my sharing and hand it over to Dr. Ashrafi. Dr. Ashrafi, thank you so much for joining us. And for our other speakers, a very quick introduction. We also have Dr. Shomay Bhattacharya, who's a neonatologist from London. Dr. Purva Deshpande is a neonatologist at Mount Sinai in Toronto. Dr. Amy Stanford is a hemodynamics neonatologist at C Family Children's Hospital in Iowa. But a more fulsome introduction for each of them before their talks. So at this point, Dr. Ashrafi, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Danny, thank you so much for the invitation. Danielle, Laura, all of NHRC. It's always an honor and a privilege to be part of this lecture series, which is great. And to all the up-and-coming senior fellows, welcome. I've been assigned this talk, how to package and market yourself to land the ideal faculty position. This is actually a fun talk for me to make. I've never made a talk like this before. Usually, of course, most talks are heavy in physiology and therapies, but this was fun to do, different. Now, in caveat, when it comes to making the decision on who ultimately gets the job here, if you look at the hierarchy, I fall kind of somewhere in the middle. The ultimate decision maker at our facility is Dr. Vijay Dar. If anybody's ever interested in coming out here, this is the gentleman to reach out to. He is the final decision maker. So I will give you my input, not give you my insight, not really being the final decision maker of faculty positions here at CHOC. And first and foremost, you want to know what is your value when you're trying to market yourself and land this ideal position. What is your value? So I have this fictitious graph here. Imagine if this is adoption by the neonatal community on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. There are certain things that are now mainstream and well adopted by the neonatal community. These are going to be things like therapeutic hypothermia, ECMO, etc. Hemodynamics, if I had to guess, probably looks something like this. It's a bit of an S-shaped curve. And as time goes on, it will become more and more widely accepted. Where are we currently? Well, these are the fathers of neonatal hemodynamics. You got Dr. Nick Evans on top. You got Dr. Martin Kluckow on the bottom out of Sydney, Australia. These guys really started it all. So we're all indebted to them. And fast forward, while they started, I think the person who brought it to the forefront, of course, is this gentleman right here, Dr. Patrick McNamara. Now, I'm going to ask Danny, Danielle, Laura for permission. I'm going to call a timeout here and just deviate from my talk for just a few minutes. So I've seen quite literally hundreds of PowerPoints about hemodynamics, and I feel like written rule that you must show a picture of a young, eager Dr. McNamara. So I obliged, and I put this in my PowerPoint as well. The interesting thing is when I've asked around, nobody actually knows the genesis of this picture. Nobody really knows where it was taken. Nobody really knows who took it. Nobody knows when it was taken. It's like one of the great medical mysteries is this picture here. So I did some investigative homework, and digging deep into the web, I came across something quite interesting. I have a theory, and I feel good about this. Patrick McNamara is the long-lost brother of Steve Jobs. They, of course, have a lot in common. You can see that their style is very similar. They both comb their hair to the right with just the exact same angle down their forehead. They both got that really kind of excited young smirk on their face with that big giant screen, some old school cathode array tube technology. I'm convinced that these guys are long lost brothers. And so while nobody knows exactly when this picture of Patrick was taken, I'm going to guess it wasn't too far off when this picture of Steve Jobs was taken, which puts us around 1984. Now, one of my skill sets is math. I'm really good at it. So if I take 2023, subtract 1984, carry the 1, that makes Patrick around 87 years old. So he looks great for his age, and we're truly indebted to him. So thank you, Patrick. But there's this new young studs and stud-ed generation that's really moved the field forward over the last 10 years. And this is just a few of them. But they've really brought neonatal hemodynamics to the forefront. And so where are we moving forward? Well, 2024 and 2025, we are definitely becoming more desirable. You guys as fellows are becoming more and more desirable and more valued. And so how do I know that? How can I say that with such confidence? Well, I can see it in my own fellow. My own fellow is Dr. J.D. Hammond. He's a fourth-year fellow here right now. And I can tell you every day he comes into work, he's got a new job interview, he's got a new job offer, and he's getting great offers. He's like, they're giving him leadership positions with stipends, and the guy hasn't been attending for even 5 minutes. So he clearly is highly desirable. And when I see JD walking around the NICU, I'm not going to lie to you, he kind of looks like, he reminds me of Justin Bieber with all of his adoring fans. You see JD there. I mean, in addition to the resemblance, there's all these major institutions throughout the country, throughout the Western country, that are just throwing themselves at JD Hammond. So there's no doubt when you ask about your value, you are very desirable, and it's only going to get more and more. While this is maybe the adoption curve, wait till the lightning strikes. Wait till U.S. News and World Report comes and says, hey, in order to be a top center, you must have a well-developed hemodynamics program. Then in that case, Justin Bieber is going to want to take selfies with JD when that happens. I mean, this is how desirable you're going to be. So that's always good to know. It's always good to have the eagle massage to know that you are wanted. Now, we must dispel a myth, however. We're still in 2023 going into 2024. And until that lightning strikes, there's a myth that if you do this fourth-year fellowship and acquire this unique and highly valuable set of skills, everybody's going to want you and love you. Even as Shrafi told me on a webinar, everybody's going to love me and want me. And while there are those who love you, let's be perfectly honest, there are going to be a lot of people that don't necessarily love you as much. These will be other members of other divisions, quite frankly, other neonatologists. It's horrible to say, but it is true. I don't know if it's confusion about what a neonatal hemodynamics or neonatal CVICU physician is. I don't know if it's jealousy, but there's always going to be, as of now, not everybody's going to welcome you with open arms. And so, well, you know, there are some programs where hemodynamics and neonatal CVICU is widely accepted. A lot of it is you have to sell your potential. People don't really know what it is. What exactly are you here trying to do? What is your goal? So now you need to sell yourself, but also what you can bring to the table. Sell your potential. And there's multiple ways we do that. We can do that with of course, our CV, letters of recommendation, interview, and there's some do's and don'ts here. One thing you want to be careful of is, of course, do not just list your accomplishments, whether it's in a CV or an interview. We all know that the person with the thickest, fattest CV, while they may get more interviews, they don't necessarily get the jobs. So it's much more than just a big, long CV. And a couple things you want to avoid is Things like, oh, I went to fill in the blank because my partner was there, or I matched in this program, so I went there. And while this is undoubtedly true, let's be perfectly honest with each other. We all would love to go to the top programs in the country, but we didn't. We didn't go to the top programs. We didn't match at our number one choice. This is just a reality of life. We're all sort of just leaves in the river of life, and sometimes the river will take us one way or another. So you want to avoid saying things like, oh, I went there because I matched there, but really tell the story of your career so that every step appears intentional and has prepared you to be the best possible match for this position. It's not, I went to program X because it was my seventh choice. I went to program X and there was this phenomenal attending I had the opportunity to work with. There was this great research lab. There was this great program that is unique to this particular institution. I went there and I acquired this skill set that was incredibly valuable, helped me mature, helped me to develop into the person I am, and I want to bring that here with you. There's an element of salesmanship. There's an element of showmanship involved. Of course, the reality is that's where you match and that's where you went. But and for physicians, we tend to be quite altruistic, particularly in the pediatrics field, and you want to be honest. And I'm not saying lie by any stretch of the imagination, but tell the story of your career so that it makes it look like everywhere you went, you succeeded and you went there for a particular skill set to acquire. Because as the decision makers, the best predictor of future success is a track record of success. If you've succeeded as a senior fellow and a categorical fellow and a resident, and you can show that every step of the way, I went to acquire a particular skill set and I did, and I applied that to the next step. This is how you're going to sell your potential to the future decision makers. Don't be discouraged if you don't meet the requirements of a particular position. They may say we want a mid-level. They may say we want certain skill set that you may or may not have. Let's be honest, chances are you are not their ideal candidate yet. I can tell you that when I started here, I was not their ideal candidate either. And a lot of the skills required to be an ideal candidate, you acquire over time. Everybody on this call has hustled, has outmaneuvered, has outworked the competition. That's why you've gotten where you've gotten. Don't put barriers in front of yourself now. This is your character to persevere and to push. So keep doing that. Don't stop here. I know I'm running short on time, so let me go really quick. Of course, don't be an island. This NHRC is a phenomenal network. Make sure you leverage that network. Everybody here is looking out for one another, and we all want each other to succeed, because anybody who succeeds in a neonatal hemodynamics or CVICU program elsewhere, I'm a beneficiary of it. So we're all here to help each other. And also, of course, why are you applying to this position? You don't want to say, well, because there was a vacancy there. Well, that may be true. You want to, again, sell yourself. There's a component of showmanship when it comes to marketing. You want to make it look like this position, when you triangulate it with your character and with the experience that you've acquired, makes it such that you guys are the perfect match for one another, them for you and you for them. Now, this I'm going to throw in here. This is my 100% Ashrafi bias alert. Okay, this is my own personal bias. I don't know if you'll necessarily see this anywhere, but I will admit my bias. One day, if I become a chief and if one day I start making the decision makers, I can tell you my biggest pet peeve is people who use filler words. And to everybody here, clean up your language. It doesn't matter if English is your first language or your fourth language. Stop with the so this patient was hypotensive and we did this inotrope, and clean up your language, because as you come, you are more than an expert. Everybody's looking to you an expert, but you're a professor. A lot of people don't really know what a hemodynamics or neonatal CVICU person is. A lot of people don't know what is a pulmonary vein D wave velocity, and why is that pertinent to identifying the significance of a ductus. So it's not just that you know that knowledge, you have to be able to articulate that knowledge to everybody else. You're a professor. You are teaching them what you know. You are teaching them what they don't know, and you're teaching them why you are so valuable. So absolutely stop using filler words. And I can tell you, I'm so irritated by this concept. Again, this is just my own bias alert. Whenever we do NeoHeart every year, if I hear anybody give a talk, and there's been some phenomenal talks from some phenomenally smart people. If there's ums, ahs, ands, every other word, I'm like, oh, forget about it. We can't put this up there. The other thing that I hate with a passion, again, just a pet peeve, when people talk about hemodynamics, if they're using their hands, I tune them out. The SVC, okay, so the blood comes down here, and you know how the tricuspid valve kind of sits like this. Okay, well, so it's sort of like this, but it's sort of kind of go. If somebody's talking hemodynamics with their hands, they have no idea what they're talking about. Develop the ability to articulate your thought. You are an expert. Eliminate the filler words. If you have to practice, but you need to show everybody who you are, because again, most people don't know what or who you are. Of course, develop an elevator pitch. I'm running over time, so let's just go over that real quick. Let's go bypass that real quick. Now, here was the biggest flaw I made, was understanding the definition of success. How do you define success? These are the difficult questions you want to ask in your interview process. What are the expectations of the institution you're going to? Do they want you to build the program, or do they want you to enhance a program? And that is very, very different. You don't want to just meet with NICU. We are uniquely in a position where we collaborate and interact with other divisions, whether we like it or not. So if you're developing if you're going to develop a hemodynamics program or be part of it, you need to mandate, I need to meet with the chief of cardiology. I need to meet with the echo lab director. If you're doing CV NICU, you need to meet with the CV ICU and the CT surgeon. You must have these conversations. And let's be honest, by and large, most of them will not be that excited to meet you. They are not excited about giving up echoes or post-op care of neonates. However, with time, if you're there every day, if you're out hustling and out working everybody, if you can provide good care, articulate your thought, and be value added, they will of course love you over time, but it takes time. Not dissimilar from caring for the baby with chronic lung disease and PH. Anything good takes time. Anything bad happens real fast. So just stick with it. You've been persevering your whole life. Don't stop now. You want to ask your division chief, how will he or she support you if there's a lack of acceptance from other divisions, which there invariably will be? And of course, how do we define success? That's it. I just want to put in a plug that we have a 4th-year neonatal CVICU and hemodynamics program. We have received applicants from phenomenal people. Unfortunately, everybody who's applied has been a J1, and as phenomenal as they've been, I would love to take them. In Southern California, we're not in a place where we can take J1 applicants right now. So if anybody's interested or knows somebody's interested, let us know. And for NeoHeart, in 2024, it's going to be in Columbia. It's going to be in New York City, run by the Columbia team. In 2025, it's going to be in San Diego, run by the Chalk team again. So with that being said, I thank you all for your time.
Shrafi, thank you as always for scintillating and always extremely entertaining talk. And I hope we get 1,000 applications now from non-J1 visa people.
Awesome.
Okay, great. If you do I would invite everyone, as the questions come up, please do put them in the Q&A, so that because we're going to collate them and put them to the panel, put the panel to the test at the end. But please put your questions in there as you go, just so that you don't forget. I'm very pleased to welcome our second speaker, Dr. Shomi Bhattacharya. She is a staff neonatologist and the director of the TNE program in the NICU at London Health Sciences Centre in London, Ontario, and she's an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Western Ontario. She's going to be trying to manage a huge topic in 10 minutes time, which is establishing a program in neonatal hemodynamics. Not a small task, but Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand you the reins.
Thank you so much, Danny. I hope you can see my slide and hear me. First of all, thank you to NHRC for giving me the opportunity. Right now, I will admit I'm feeling a little bit intimidated, because what if I use filler words? So I'm going to be really trying not to do that. Let's talk about setting up your own TNE program. And before I actually begin the talk proper, just want to give the audience here an idea of what my journey has been. So I'm an international medical graduate. I did 3 years of NPM fellowship in London, Ontario, and then went over to Toronto to do my TNE under Patrick, Reagan, and Amish. And after that, I was recruited back to London as a strategic hire to set up the TNE program. That was in 2018. I was successful in setting up the program, and this is 2023 is the 5th year of the TNE program, which I have now expanded, and we have our own fellowship program. So the disclaimer is that I'm going to talk using my personal lived experience, and I'm going to talk about things that really worked for us and some of the things that didn't. And I hope that the next generation of trainees can benefit from that insight. And I also understand that some of my experiences are not valid elsewhere or internationally, but I will try to stick to some general themes that I think are crucial. So we're going to talk about collaborative approach, need for equipment and personnel, processes like archiving, reporting, creating guidelines and policies, some of the intricacies surrounding creating database, billing, funding, and of course, having always a plan of longitudinal growth, expansion, and a little bit focus on TNE physician wellness. So as Amir had very nicely mentioned, that TNE does not exist in vacuum. We are an unique intersection of 2 major branches, NPM and pediatric cardiology. And I think to have a collaborative approach is probably the most important step in creating a successful program. The buy-in that Amir mentioned is absolutely important. You have to have engagement, interest from your NICU partners, stakeholders. And again, cannot overemphasize, it's probably the rate limiting step in how fast you will be successful in setting up your program. Having said that, I agree that the last decade has shown a lot of momentum in how neonatal hemodynamics is seen and appreciated by the neonatologist. So I just have to mention an anecdote which I heard on being hired here, that the father of Canadian hemodynamics gave a talk in London around, I believe in 2011, 2012, about TNE. And after that, the behind doors comment after that great talk from somebody we all very much respect was the then head of cardiology has said behind closed doors that over my dead body. That's in London. And then cut to 2018 when I was hired as somebody to set up a TNE program. Having said that, it was a different chief of cardiology at that point. So yes, minds do change. Full conversation about effective and safe implementation. Talking honestly about boundaries, indication, about who is going to do the first time echoes, what's the review process going to be, is absolutely crucial. Now, both these steps, buy-in from be it cardiology and ICU, does not have to happen after you are recruited. In fact, some of you may actually already know which program you're heading to and what your role is going to be. You can actually engage in these conversations right away. I would encourage, if you know where you're heading and what your role is going to be, engage in rounds, journal clubs, case presentation, and talks before even going and starting your job, which kind of sells and shows your interest, passion, and outline how TNE can be helpful. Emotional intelligence is very important. You cannot go in and say, I know it all, I can manage it better than you, and that I can scan better than you. If you do that, nobody will like you. So be very careful in maintaining a respectful conversation about what your skills and how you can complement the program instead of taking over anybody's service. So let's talk a little bit about logistics and equipment. I think this is the second rate limiting step in how fast your program is going to be successful. So absolutely, you need your standalone dedicated NICU echocardiography machine. It doesn't matter which company, which product it is, but it has to be ideally an echocardiography machine. I would recommend please step away from using an ultrasound machine or a POCUS machine for TNE. It can be a temporary measure, but it shouldn't be a permanent measure. Recognize that these machines are quite expensive, and the worst thing that can happen to a fresh graduate is if they land into a program and there is no machine, and then you are sitting in vacuum and you cannot scan, and that's not ideal. So again, if you know where you're heading and you're in your recruitment talks, please have one of the difficult questions is to ask whether they have the equipment and the infrastructure to support your hire. If not, then have those talks start early on about who is going to fund the buying of the machine. Many of my Canadian colleagues have gone through this, and we have found that the hospital foundations can be a great asset. But for me, I had to engage in the actual raising the funds, involving in the campaigns, etc., creating the publicity, etc. So again, these could be actually started even before you start your job. If there is a situation where there is no machine, be creative. For example, I entered into a shared model with cardiology. I found that they had two machines in their fleet, which they were not using. One was an old GE machine, one was an old Philips machine. I decided that we are going to do a share model till we buy. It took me 1 year to buy our own machine, so we shared our machine with cardiology. Now, when you're expected to buy your machine, it will be an expectation that you know the specifications of what model you're going to buy, what kind of presets you want in your machine when they actually deliver the machine. So some of you may be very technology adept and you already know this, and some of you may not. I think it's very worth your time in your final months of your fellowship to find that echo tech who is always that equipment expert, and every program has one, and spend some time with them learning those machine specification and presets that you would want in your own machine. Remember, when you're buying your own machine, always include the service contract. Do not forget that. And again, one practical advice is when you buy your own machine, try to incorporate that machine in an existing fleet of investigational services such as cardiology, because then your machine is under a group of machines and therefore will be under biomed cover of how the machine is maintained, etc., rather than a single machine out there in the NICU, and then all the responsibility might default to you. And we are, after all, physicians, not biomed specialists. One thing I was very careful about is I had a very early on created a guidelines as to where my machine was stored, how safe it was overnight. And I also try to make sure that you're very clear upfront as to who is authorized to access your machine. Your machine cannot become something that, some healthcare team members are doing ultrasound on at night, or, looking at something that is not involved in clinical care, or fellows are using it as practice. This is a very expensive equipment, and therefore you should be very honest about who gets access, authorized access to touch your machine. So the next part of a very important part of your program is the personnel part. So when you begin your program, if you're going in and building your own program as a junior TNE staff, it's a very reasonable expectation that you are conducting all the scans. As your program expands, and if you are in an ICU, which is a level 3, which has over 45 beds, you have high acuity cases, and you're getting a lot of consults, you will realize that it takes a lot of time for you to do the scanning. We are hemodynamic experts. We need to be able to scan, but we necessarily do not have to do all the scans. So having, again, echo techs who might scan for you, allowing you to interpret and actually manage the baby if you have no other scanners in your program, is again very important thought. And again, because these personnel need funding and financial resources, it's very important to have these early negotiations even during your hiring process, to know that you can have backup to really flourish in your role, while as you can delegate these tasks to somebody else. As your service will expand and you show your value and you're seeing you're getting a lot of consults, it's very reasonable to again talk to your division chief about how you may need additional T&E experts to expand your service. A little bit about service model. So my advice to all of the people who are going to start their new program, create a model that is comprehensive, which is consistent, ethical, yet sustainable. I think the first thing that happened to me personally is I wanted to do it all, that I would do it anytime you have a sick baby, let's do it. I had very, very kind mentors who actually reined me back. They were non-T&E people who said, you cannot survive if you do this. So they advised me to start a regular daytime service, 5 days per week, with all through the year. And then as time has gone on, we have been able to expand it a little bit. For us, overnight, weekends, and everything are still covered by cardiology. You can provide continuous 24/7 coverage, but you'll probably need a lot more T&E staff to be able to do that. Having said that, when I was beginning the program, and as Amir said, that we really need to showcase our service, I would definitely come sometimes in weekends to manage CDH cases, hypotensive cases. And when those cases made a difference, that really, really improved how well T&E was accepted within my institution. So basically, your model of service is proportional to your NICU capacity, equity, and how many T&E personnel you have. Be open to consults, be accessible, and when making hemodynamic changes, please be polite and considerate about MRP. I cannot overemphasize how important it is for your success and your program's success to be considerate about the neonatologist as well, who may not have this extra training, but still are really trying to do the best for the babies. Moving on to when you do have an equipment, you are doing your program, then you have to write up your guidelines and policies. One of the first policies you need to write about is, what is the indication? How is the workflow going to be? How do you access the T&E team when you have a consult? Set up little protocols for the standard screenings for chronic pulmonary hypertension, follow-up for PDAs, etc. And then the other very important step when you're starting is to start maintaining a local database. It can be as simple as an Excel sheet, or it can be a little more complicated. You can integrate your into your local database, but whatever type of database you mention, you will realize that having a database right from day one of your program is absolutely important, rather than going to 6 months when you want to see how much work you have done and you're scrambling back to look at, okay, what did I do? How much personnel do I need, etc. No, day one, you need to record how much, what time, daytime, weekend T&Es, what is the indication, etc. Reporting and archiving. So that's the next crucial part of a T&E program and a process. You have to have clear lines of communications where you are documenting the results and documenting your recommendation for management strategy. This could be in the form of a consultation note, which could be either paper versus electronic. Of course, along with this, I think, as I learned from my fellowship in Toronto, that whatever you write, you still go back and talk to the MRP, you still go back and talk to the fellows. This is a unique opportunity to actually impart education, knowledge, etc., show your value as well. So yes, written notes, but as well as a clear communication with the team. Now, this one advice would be keep these reporting as simple as possible so that it doesn't take additional 2 hours of your time to finish a report. Some of the existing EchoPack, ISCV, etc., actually have their own reporting system, which are practical and easy. And whichever institute you're going to, remember, you are again not going into vacuum. They often have cardiology. They often have some sort of imaging services. And when you have some sort of imaging services, remember they already have some sort of reporting. Latching on to that system is my advice, is the easiest and the path of least resistance that you can do instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and create your own reporting system. So the next part I want to talk about is the funding and billing. Now, this is a very complicated, area, and it's very, very region dependent, and will be variable even within Canada and, of course, outside Canada. I think I would just leave it to say that explore the billing options available for the service and the different types of billing codes you could apply. Having said that, I'm sure I'm not alone, but many Canadian systems didn't know how to bill for it. So 2018 to 2021, I actually did not bill for any of the TNEs, and all the billing went to cardiology for some sort of default phenomena. And then now I have been able to separate it, and we have our own billing system. So I think this is going to be a journey. You should have open conversations about the stakeholders right from the get-go, so that you don't have the 3 years of lag that I had, where for some reason the money was going into an entirely different division. Now, Now we are going to talk a little bit of how you have established the program. How should you expand? Well, first of all, when you begin it, set realistic expectation. Prioritize the cases that are really clinically useful. So basically do the showy cases, right? Manage the hypotension, manage the PPHN, manage the CDH. Oh, you're like this hero in the NICU. So everybody's so impressed with you. As the program is established, expand your indication, the routine ones, the follow-up ones, etc. As you expand, then assess your personnel need and make your changes and adaptation of whether I need more techs, whether I need more TNE people, am I ready to hire fellows? Always showcase the TNE service whenever you get an opportunity. Not only at the beginning, as you run your program, you get a grand round opportunity, latch on to it, present what you have done, present the numbers in your database, the cases that really made a difference. If your foundation is doing a section on what is really great and innovative, latch on to it, put your TNE up there. Once the program is established, then in 1 and 1.5 years, I would say start looking into whether you want to expand into academic goals, such as and expand your into fellowship or research, and then keep it moving, because the sky is the limit. Not just setting up a clinical program. Our expectations are you are experts, you're going to further education and research. Last thing that I want to mention, which I think is an emerging topic in at least within neonatology and pediatrics, but let's make it a little bit about TNE physician wellness. Something that we didn't talk about when I was starting. Well, I realized the TNE neonatologist role can be intensely stressful and overwhelming. You have your standard neonatology expectation, you have your standard academic expectation, and now you're starting your own TNE subspecialty. You are being repeatedly thrown into taking care of the babies who are the most sickest. Many of them may not survive the night. You're up there trying to kind of revert some irreversible cardiovascular processes. And you can feel very alone, very lonely, and very stressed. While we cannot revert all of it, I think it's important to recognize that this position could, lead to a lot of stress, create safe space and safe people to talk about it, and be open about developing coping strategies. I do believe building a T&E team is very important so that you're not this one person alone trying to create and manage all this overwhelming load. And additional resources and personnel, therefore, are again integral to your wellness. And in this regard, I do think cardiology, again, can play a great role. If you are the one T&E expert in your division, and you have no other neonatal hemodynamic expert that you can reach out to, then you need to have good, strong friends in cardiology who will help and sometimes address your doubts about scanning, findings, etc. And I think that is very important because I was alone in my unit for almost 2 years before we hired a second person. So I think that is almost at the end. This is sort of my workflow for you guys. So even in the first 3 months of your final 3 months of your training, for those of you who are going and knowing where you're going, you start networking with your NICU and your cardiology colleagues. Start your negotiations about equipment, personnel, and increase your firsthand knowledge on the equipment and archiving process. When you are starting your first 6 to 12 months as T&E staff, your focus should be on obtaining and adapting your equipment, finalizing policies and guidelines, develop your database, and really showcase the value of your T&E service by working super hard. When you are in the next 12 to 18 months as a staff, then you need to have ongoing assessment of the utilization, invest in expanding your resource and personnel, expand the clinical application, and then expand your academic focus into research and education. So I think that makes a nice segue for Purva to talk about research and T&E. And I'm happy to take questions at the end of after all the panelists have presented.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, for mapping out a really complex process for all of our trainees. I think you did miss one thing, which was ensuring that your NICU procures a steady supply of vasopressin. In case some units haven't used vasopressin before, that's obviously an important aspect to consider. Obviously, saying that half in jest, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Purva Deshpande she's a T&E trained staff neonatologist at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, an assistant professor of pediatrics. She is going to be speaking about how to be successful in research and QI during your NHT&E training. Her own research interests are in cerebral monitoring and cerebral hemodynamics in preterm infants using non-invasive tools. Dr. Deshpande, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was trying to find the unmute button for a while. Can you see my slides?
We can, but you're now in presentation view. That's great.
Okay. Now it's good. All right, excellent. So thanks, Danny, for the kind introduction. So I'm going to be talking about how to be successful during your neonatal hemodynamics training, about the research or the QI project that you may be doing. So before I start, I just wanted to make a couple of disclosures, but these disclosures are mostly on what this talk is not going to be on. So this is not a talk about how to conduct a good research project. I'm far from an expert in that. This is also not a talk on ideas to do new neonatal hemodynamics project. There are many other talks in the NHRC YouTube channel that you can refer to. Mostly what I'm going to talk about is the mistakes that I have made as maybe some as a neonatal hemodynamic trainee, some as an early career investigator. Some of those mistakes I hope that others could learn from. Some of them definitely I learned from, but maybe the best mistakes are the ones that you don't have to pay for. So some of them are going to be just kind of general guiding principles, some that I received from my mentors earlier on, some that I wish somebody had told me earlier on so I could have avoided doing some of those mistakes. So this is going to be mostly a talk about mistakes. So now just to kind of take a step back from research. Now, most of us have chosen to do the neonatal hemodynamics fellowship training because we have a real passion for managing our babies with hemodynamic issues, and a real curiosity of how differently these babies are to be managed. And if you're like me, you probably were intrigued during your neonatal fellowship about your own questions on why a particular management was chosen for a particular baby, why a particular drug was chosen to treat hypotension, why one PDA was treated, why the other was not, why again PPHN management. You probably were curious about what TNE added to that additional data points that you received from TNE that you were unable to receive from your regular clinical parameters. And then now, again, switching gears back to research. Now, in many of the neonatal hemodynamics fellowship programs, research is kind of inbuilt into your training, pretty much as a mandate. But I just want to emphasize here that the reason for that mandate is not to create a researcher out of every trainee. And I just want to highlight this article that came in JAMA earlier this year, which says that it takes an average of 17 years to change practice from from evidence. So really, for any fellowship training, for example, the idea is not to create more and more and more researchers to build to that bank of evidence, but also to create smart clinicians who can actually help bridge that gap in between the creation of evidence to change of practice. And so to me, the purpose of engaging in a research or a QI project during your fellowship training should be viewed more as an extension to that initial curiosity that actually led you to do the neonatal hemodynamics training in the first place. So it's essentially just an extension of that curiosity. And so, why would you want to do research during your fellowship program? Now, some of us are really clear about that they want to pursue an academic path really from earlier on, and that you exactly know where you're going to be, you know exactly what your area of research is going to be. But for others, it might be, there might be other reasons why pursuing a research project could help you. So one of the things that it can be helpful with is it enhances learning. So for example, if you are doing a study on prospective imaging, doing that study is actually going to make you an excellent sonographer. So much more than what your fellowship training is going to help you with. So you become an expert in imaging. The other example is if your research projects involved a particular measurement, let's say you're doing a project on Simpson's biplane ejection fraction. Now, doing that research project is actually the best way to learn about that topic. But not just that, while you're doing your literature review, you are going to stumble on so many other questions, and you're going to learn about many other measures of cardiac function, for example, and you're actually going to end up being an expert in that particular area. So it really, really accelerates the learning process. Now, the other area is it really stimulates critical thinking. because then it really helps you to understand research as well, and ultimately help you in applying it to patient care. And next is continuous professional development. Now this cannot be more relevant in this field, because it's such a rapidly evolving field, as Amir showed the graph before, that it's been a steep growth in this field over the past few years. And just to give you an example, when I was a hemodynamic trainee maybe 8-9 years ago, there are many things that I did not learn during my fellowship training that I only learned later on when I was doing a research project on a particular subject. For example, I did not learn about strain during my fellowship training, but only learned about it while doing research about strain. And again, I think if we want to practice neonatal hemodynamics, all down our career, then it is really important to keep up with the pace, because it is going to, more and more things are going to change in the coming next few years. And then finally, it's always the QI piece, because ultimately we all want to improve patient care, improve outcomes. And so that will also help us identify areas for development. For example, and just an example is establishing a PDA screening program, for example. So the first step, sorry, my slides are jumping. Okay, so the first step is to find the right supervisor or a mentor. And for many people, certainly for me, my supervisors ended up being my my career mentors. But it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. You can have one person as your mentor and someone else as your specific project supervisor. So first of all, how do you find that person? So it should be someone who shares your specific area of interest. How do you know that? You review their publications, you kind of understand what their field is. You also get to understand what their kind of research philosophy is. And then the next step is to find out if they're willing to supervise you. Because if someone is extremely busy, then they may be the best person because their area does match yours, but they may not be available for you. So it needs to be someone who's engaged and who is available to make that commitment for time and effort. It should be someone who's invested in your success, not just their own success. Always know that as a trainee, it is your responsibility to initiate that first contact, request that first meeting, and then maybe after your first meeting, if you have made some kind of agreements in principle, then to also request meetings going on, because it doesn't end at the first meeting. You have to keep that engagement in letting them know that you are truly interested and that you're truly passionate about this particular research project. Sometimes it may not be someone in your own department that you may be interested to work with. So seek mentors or supervisors outside of your department. So it may not be someone in neonatology even. It may be someone in PICU or cardiology. And if you don't know such a person, then ask for recommendations. Ask someone to make that initial introduction, so that then you can you can then initiate the contact and take it from there. Think broadly about collaborators that you may want on your project. Always know that people coming from outside of T&E are likely to bring their own unique expertise to your project. And that is actually going to really make your project very strong and of high quality. So the next step is how to choose a project. So a few tips. Now, many people may be really aware of what they want to do from the very beginning, right? They may know exactly what project they want to do or what their area of interest is. But for some others, it may not be clear in the beginning. And if that is the case, then do spend some time in kind of exploring, and start with a really open mind. Don't block yourself from any projects that you may not want to be involved with. My own experience is that the things that I blocked were the things that I was weak at. And my steepest learning was actually when I was pushed out of my comfort zone to actually go and learn those areas that I was not very strong in. And we all know about the SMART acronym, and I'm not going to go over this, but it cannot overemphasize how important it is while choosing your project. So do start with an open mind. Spend some time in finding that one project that really excites you. Brainstorm and share ideas with your colleagues, with your supervisors, and then finally also be realistic. So for example, when I was doing my master's project, I wanted to understand the hemodynamics of intraventricular hemorrhage, and I wanted to solve the problem of IVH once and for all. But it was only after a lot of brainstorming together with my supervisors that we decided that the first step is to test the feasibility of doing hemodynamic measurements during the first 72 hours, which then ended up becoming my master's thesis project. So be realistic on the timeline, but as well about what your primary aims are, what it is that you want to achieve. Spend a lot of time initially in planning the project. The rest becomes really easy once you have done that initial homework, that initial planning. So get your collaborators to review and ask for their opinion on your proposal. Don't leave things for, okay, let's collect the data and then we'll decide and how to analyze this later. No, define things really, really clearly in the beginning. So make sure that there is a clearly defined hypothesis. The outcomes are defined, sample size if it's appropriate for your project. So everything needs to be really clear in your head about what it is that you're going to do. One of the best advice that I had received from my mentors was, when you're writing the proposal, have a vision of what are the two tables and the two figures that are actually going to appear in your paper. So that kind of makes it easy to plan things at the early stage. Review your data sheet early. Do not keep on collecting the 150 variables per echo, because that is going to be a huge waste of time if you're not going to actually analyze those in the end. Discuss your timeline early, and always know that it is going to take longer than what you had planned. So always kind of plan for that extra time for completion of your project. It is pretty much invariable, and many people will kind of attest to that. Now, remember that the supervisor-trainee or the mentor-mentee relationship is a two-way relationship, but it is driven by the trainee. So really what you get out of that relationship depends on you, like what you want out of that relationship. So it is your responsibility as a trainee to seek specific guidance or help if you're stumbling upon something. For example, if you're not sure about a particular measurement that you're doing, there's no point in doing that measurement for 50 scans, and then you halfway in your data collection, and then you're like you realize that you're doing that measurement wrongly. So do seek and do ask for feedback. Be open to critical feedback from the beginning. The people who are best invested in your success will be the ones who will give you that open and critical feedback. Also be ready to be pushed out of your comfort zones. So for example, my supervisor had realized that I was weak in epidemiology and methodology. So they pushed me, they literally had to push me to do a course on biostatistics during my master's. And that was probably the most kind of steepest learning that I've had as a clinician scientist training. And then throughout your project, schedule regular meetings. So review your progress. Earlier on, you may want to meet more often because you will have more questions earlier on. And then as time goes on, you may just want to then, you may not have to meet that often, but again, be, update them timely of your progress. And then lastly, I think one question always leads to multiple questions, and that's what curiosity is, and that's what research is all about. And so seek extended training, be it electives in other departments, whether it's online courses, if it's graduate degree, if that's something that works for you and your timeline and is appropriate. Cannot emphasize that the importance of hard work, honesty. So collect your data or whatever that you're doing. It must be done with honesty. When blinding is a part of your methodology, make sure that you are actually following it diligently, because again, remember that the whole purpose of doing research is that you want to establish that it is going to be reproducible in other areas of the world. The research that you're doing on your 50, 100, 200 babies is going to be applicable to the rest of the babies in the world. And then remember that the relationships that you build are actually going to last, your career. And the collaborations that you build are only going to expand from here. And again, finally, do not lose sight of the big picture. Be reminded of that curiosity that, again, led you to do this training in the first place. And that's why we are here. And that's why we do neonatal hemodynamics. And that's why we do research in neonatal hemodynamics. So with that thought, I am going to finish my talk. And again, we'll be happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande, for that wonderful talk. We'll move next to Dr. Amy Stanford, who's going to be speaking to us about how to know if you're progressing well during your NHT&E training. And Dr. Stanford, she is a T&E trained staff neonatologist at Steed Family Children's Hospital in Iowa and a clinical assistant professor of pediatrics and neonatology at the University of Iowa. Dr. Stanford, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand you over the floor.
Sounds good. Real quick, Danny, do you see my presentation viewer or the regular one?
You are in presentation viewer. You are in presenter view.
There you go. Better now?
That's great.
Sounds good. All right. I will try to be brief so that we can have a little bit of some time for some questions. So kind of going through, how do you go from being a trainee to a consultant in hemodynamics? And I really think the first step you need to conquer is measuring, because that's the basics of things. Then moving on to, how are you going to go about acquiring those images yourself? Making an assessment and interpreting what your images and measurements are telling you. How are you going to recommend the team to manage what you find? And finally, the last step is to become an independent consultant. So today we're going to talk about our benchmarks for skill acquisition. How are we going to seek feedback, and what do you really need to learn? So first of all, the biggest first step, learning your measurements and have them validated. We've learned this the hard way here at Iowa, that we can teach people how to measure, but we really need to validate whether they're doing those measurements correctly. So learning the sequence of the echoes is a really important first step, knowing exactly what images you need to do, what are the next ones you need to do. A really big part, though, is how to obtain those correct views. I love Reagan's image from the right here. So this is the same baby, nothing has changed, but you can see by not getting the images in the correct plane, you have your heart tipped down to the left, your RV is going to be smaller in one, larger than the other. If you're not getting your parasternals, getting your levels at the correct spot, you can actually give a baby pulmonary hypertension on the echo when it's not actually there. So really making sure you know what the images are supposed to look like so that you can obtain what those images need to look like. How do you go about getting exposure during these things? We've already heard research is a great place to start. You can learn measurements, doing clinical electives, attending any sorts of reviews or conferences on hemodynamics, and we obviously have all of our online resources. Next step, acquiring those images. So how do you start that? We tend to follow it's starting on bigger babies, so greater than 1,500 grams. And what we do is, if you're first starting just learning how to echo, you're going to be obtaining those images after the clinical echo has already been obtained. So that way there's no rush, there's no pressure, you can practice. And we tend usually about 15 to 20 minutes of practice. Once you're getting better at that, you can start scans, but the goal is to spend no more than 45 minutes at a patient at one time. So once you've conquered doing a full TN echo in less than 20 minutes on greater than 1,500 gram babies, that's when we start to let our trainees start to scan even smaller babies with a goal of being at the bedside at only 30 minutes. As you can see, the goal is you need to learn how to do an echo in less than 20 minutes before you can kind of move on to those smaller babies. So we do it in about 4 different steps. One of the things that I learned when I was doing my fellowship is that I have to advocate for myself. And so I kept track of, I'm doing my scans in X number of minutes. This is my smallest baby. Do you think I'm ready to advance and go on to smaller babies? How do you ask for feedback on your scans? That's such an important part. So you really need to advocate for yourself. Sometimes we get a little bit caught up in trying to do everything we need to do, but we need to remember to teach our trainees. And so what I recommend is ask people, say, hey, how did you think my long axis was? And if Patrick McNamara is reviewing it, he will say it wasn't great, but that's all right. You will learn. And if you're struggling with a view, sometimes it took me having Adrian Bischoff come to the bedside for my short axis and show me how to do it, and then it clicked. So sometimes you might just need to ask them, I know I've tried that way. Can you come to the bedside with me when I'm doing this scan and just see if I can get some real-time feedback? How do you get feedback on your impression and your plan? Well, my biggest tip is that you need to present every case in detail, even the boring ones like the just chronically elevated PVRI. It's important to be systematic and present every case in a detailed, systematic way so that you're not missing anything. Always try to come up with a plan, and then sometimes I remember I would have differing opinions than my attendings on what I would want to do for a baby. And so I think it's especially important, if you don't have the exact same treatment plan, to discuss what you think you might have done in the situation and see then maybe if the attending has any feedback for why or why not they would not have done it that way. So what do you need to learn during your hemodynamic training? So for us, a complete TN echo includes a high quality scan with a brain imaging in less than 20 minutes. And why do we have such a small time window? It's because you don't have more than 20 minutes sometimes in these critically ill neonates, that CDH who you're trying to prevent from going on ECMO. Or maybe it's that 22, 23 weeker who really isn't going to tolerate a prolonged scan. So you need to be high quality in less than 20 minutes. Knowledge is a really big part of this, and you need to read all the time based on the cases you're dealing with, or even those cases that you might not see. 1 year of fellowship, you're not going to see everything that you're going to see as an attending. For example, my entire hemodynamic fellowship never had a vein of Galen. 11 months into being a faculty, Patrick and Reagan were on a plane to Europe, and we had a vein of Galen come from a referral hospital. The fellow at the time was like, I don't know what to do. What do you do? I've never seen one like this. And I was like, neither have I. I'm going to print off Reagan's paper that I've read 1,000 times about vein of Galen. We're going to go through things in a systematic standpoint and go through it. And so really, if you're learning, if you're reading as you go, and you treat every case in a systematic way, you should be able to figure things out, because the goal is not to know about everything by the end of your hemodynamic fellowship, but it's to be able to figure things out and work through the cases. Finally, one of the things we recommend for all of our trainees is to keep a logbook. You're going to do lots of echoes. You're going to want to keep track of what you've seen. So we kept track of when we did the echo, what was the gestational age of the baby, what was the weight, the indication, who supervised it. And you can do this even in the beginning when you're not doing full echoes. So that way you can see, wow, I've done 25 apexes, but I've only done 2 long axes. Maybe I should start working on my long axis more often. And I would recommend keep that logbook up to date weekly, at least, if not daily. If you go longer than that, it's going to be hard to remember what you need to do. So I went really quickly because I wanted to have time for questions. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Dr. Stain, for